Mr. President.
Minority Leader is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, last Sunday, the nation lost one of its foremost leaders on military and defense policies, and I lost a good friend with the passing of Les Aspen. I came to know and appreciate Les when we served together in the House of Representatives, and he and Junket, his huge, hairy sheepdog, shared an office down the hall from me in the Cannon House office building. I came to know and appreciate him as a good and decent man who was never too busy to stop and exchange a joke or two. I also came to admire and respect him as a dedicated, selfless public servant. At the time of his death, he had spent more than 3 decades in public service as a member of the House of Representatives, as chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, as a chief advisor on military policy to the Clinton-Gore campaign, and as Secretary of Defense, and then finally now as the head of the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. No person could have been better prepared for these important and demanding positions. He brought to them the best of education, including an undergraduate degree from Yale, a master's degree from Oxford, and a PhD in economics from MIT. And he had the best training, as he had worked on the staffs of Senator Bill Proxmire, Dr. Walter Heller, when he chaired the Council of Economic Advisors, and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Not only was Les well educated and well versed in public policy, he was a person who cared deeply for this country and all of its people. He may well be most remembered for his brief yet stormy tenure as Secretary of Defense. To those who were surprised by his controversial tenure in this position, I can only say that I'm surprised that they were surprised. Les Aspen had always been controversial. He was never afraid to take a position, sometimes a lonely, unpopular position. He was elected to Congress as a critic of the Vietnam War, but backed President Reagan's military buildup and the decision to go to war against Iraq. As chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Les was a one-man think tank, as he always seemed to be on the cutting edge on defense issues. An AP reporter dubbed him a strategic intellectual. He was as comfortable in dealing with foreign policy and defense as he was in reviewing Pentagon procurement practices. And he had that incredible and marvelous ability to present the most complicated and difficult public policy issue in simple and easily understood ways. Les Aspen was the logical choice to reshape the Pentagon and U.S. military in the post-Cold War era. When President-elect Clinton nominated him for the position of Secretary of Defense, the Washington Post noted that it had seemed that Mr. Aspen had spent most of his professional life preparing for the Defense Secretary's job. The Washington Times remarked that he had devoted nearly every waking hour as a student, professional, and politician to thinking about weapons and soldiers. Everyone knew that the adjustments to the post-Soviet world would be difficult and controversial, and they were. Secretary Aspen did not shrink from these challenges. He welcomed them. His time as head of the Pentagon was a time of shifting international commitments and new challenges posed by the disintegration of the Soviet Union. This included the painful downsizing of the military and the review and revision of the Pentagon's budget and procurement procedures. It was a time for reshaping of a military that for a half-century had been designed to fight global war and would now be remolded for world peacekeeping missions and for international humanitarian expeditions. Mr. President, the accolades and eulogies now being delivered in honor of Les Aspen are well-deserved and well-earned. The United States is indeed indebted to Congressman and Secretary Aspen for his years of public service, for his legislative achievements, and for his tremendous contributions to the defense of our great and free country. But I will always remember him as my good and decent friend down the hall, with that huge hairy dog who was never too busy to stop and share a laugh with you. Mr. President, my wife Linda and I extend to the family of Les Aspen our most heartfelt condolences. We share their grief, and we share their loss. I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.